On a personal level, and also as an RBE proponent, I'm kind of glad we live in a society as technically advanced as it is. Technology can be used to enrich us and improve our lives, but unfortunately can also be used to do things like harm our planet and hinder people's digital privacy. When I tell folks today that we have the technical means to provide everyone with their basic needs, as well as many amenities, free of cost to them or anyone else for that matter, they often think I have pie-in-the-sky ideals about what type of world we can live in. What these people fail to recognise, through little fault of their own, is the true potential of many of even today's technologies to create abundance in a multitude of ways. Hi there, I'm Adam, welcome back. Today we continue with the RBE Fundamentals series. In this episode, we're going to focus on a lot of the technologies that might be implemented in a resource-based economy in order to propagate abundance and sustainability. I glossed over this in previous episodes, but here I'm going to go a bit more in depth. Today we're going to talk about technologies and the implementations of such in a variety of areas, from food, water and energy production to manufacturing and distribution methods. I will also cover automation and its role in a resource-based economy. RBEs would likely be highly mechanized and automated, so this will be a focal point in the episode. I'm also going to go over things like recycling, as well as the concept of the circular economy. With all that said, let's get into it. Ever since the Neolithic era, we humans have been practicing organized agriculture, which takes many forms. Gone were the days of gathering berries and hunting game as a means of sustenance for these early civilizations. They could now do things like grow grains and rear livestock. This is what led to small bands of primitive nomadic peoples settling down and forming larger, civilized towns and villages. Aside from more labor-efficient extraction methods, and methods that increase output, agriculture really hasn't changed that much. We're still using huge swathes of land for crops and livestock, which to add to this, guzzles water and other resources. Animal agriculture is also responsible for a significant chunk of global greenhouse emissions too, so all in all traditional agriculture isn't exactly healthy for ecology. There are technical solutions to this, some of which have already been implemented to limited scales. The two resources traditional plant-based agriculture uses the most are land and water. So how can we make more efficient use of these resources while still meeting demand? Vertical farming is a form of industrial agriculture that can take many forms, such as hydroponics, aeroponics, and aquaponics. In a vertical farm, you have multiple floors containing multiple shelves, where plants can grow via a variety of the aforementioned methods. These plants can either be provided natural sunlight or artificial light supplied by LED lamps. The way this food is grown depends on the method that is used. Hydroponics is pretty simple. It's very similar to keeping flowers in a table vase. Plants are partially submerged in a water solvent, and are then provided with a mineral nutrient solution. The biggest advantage of hydroponics is its efficiency. It uses 70 to 90% less water than traditional agriculture, while growing more produce. Aeroponics takes this even further, by foregoing a water solvent altogether, and instead using a mist that is mixed with nutrients, making for even more efficient use of water. The downside to this, however, is that it requires more labour to be maintained. So what about aquaponics? Aquaponics is kind of a double-edged sword because it deals with multiple problems we face with agriculture all at once. On top of the issue of land and water use that we have with traditional land agriculture, we also have a global overfishing problem. Aquaponics is a form of agriculture where plant-based produce is partially submerged in a marine microhabitat. Here, you're getting both a sustainable abundance of plant produce and fish. The fish produce nutrients from their waste, which fertilizes the microhabitat and provides nutrients to the plants through the presence of microbes. It's not only an efficient way to grow things such as vegetables, it's also one of the most efficient and sustainable ways to grow seafood, because the combination of hydroponics and aquaculture creates a symbiotic relationship between the two components. In terms of meat production, the way we currently produce meat is highly unsustainable. The in vitro culturing of meat produce is gradually being improved already, and there are many startups that have invested in this technology. In simple terms, with this method of producing meat, stem cells are placed into a bioreactor and fed nutrients. These cells then begin to multiply through mitosis, which eventually creates meaty tissues. The advantages of producing meat this way are that it's animal-free, uses less water, is highly scalable and can be controlled for various health factors. Although it's quite controversial, which I think it shouldn't be, GMOs have the potential to further increase produce yields, make foodstuffs use less resources to produce, as well as make our food healthier. Imagine eating a burger, for example, that was highly nutritious and had little negative impact on your health. That's the kind of thing we can achieve with GMOs and cell culture. Okay, so we have ways to create a sustainable abundance of food, but what about storing it? Food is perishable, and much like energy, suffers from the problem of use it or lose it, at least within the current social and technological paradigm. But does it need to be? What if we had facilities underground where surplus food could be placed in a vacuum and flash frozen, sequestered for future use? If the frozen temperature were cold enough, we could store many surplus foodstuffs indefinitely. If you like, we could call this a food battery. I can only see developments in areas such as cryogenics making this ever more feasible. We've been freezing and refrigerating food for over 100 years. This will just be turning it up a notch. So, we have a system of efficiently creating a sustainable abundance of foodstuffs. And we have a way of storing surplus food like we do storing surplus electricity in batteries. But how are we going to power all this, as well as other parts of the economy? Also, where is all this water going to come from? First, let's answer the latter. For most of the modern era, we have relied on rain and groundwater as a source of clean, drinkable and usable water. For areas of the world like mine, this isn't really a problem. However, if you live somewhere arid or in a desert, it's a much bigger issue as there's often not enough rain. Regardless of how much rain a region might receive, there are far superior methods of extracting potable water, such as desalination. Around 70% of the world's surface is covered in saline, salt water, yet we still have water scarcity in many parts of the world. Desalination is the process of taking a source of water and filtering out any salt or pollutants through a few different methods. There are two main types of desalination techniques that are used on a large scale: evaporative desalination and reverse osmosis. In evaporative desalination, water, mainly seawater, is evaporated, which separates it from any soluble contaminants, which are mostly salts. Reverse osmosis, on the other hand, is where water is filtered in liquid form through a semi-permeable membrane. While evaporative desalination requires a power source in order to boil water, reverse osmosis uses little energy because water can be gravity fed through the membrane. Both methods of desalination could either be used as a sole source of water or in conjunction with more traditional water purification, which I can foresee being the case in many wetter climates. Now, we've covered food, water, what about energy? What if I told you that we have enough geothermal potential to power many areas of the world for millions of years? What if I told you that if we could cover just 2% of the Sahara Desert in solar panels, we could provide for all of the world's electricity needs, and more? What if I told you that there is a nuclear fuel that is safer, more efficient, and more abundant than uranium and plutonium? Well, the truth is, all of these things are in fact the case. The burning of fossil fuels is not only damaging to our planet, it's entirely unnecessary with our current technical capacity, and is in fact inferior in terms of output compared to more sustainable forms of energy production. First, let's analyse the extent of how we could use renewables as a source of energy. There are many different types of renewable energy sources. The main ones that spring to mind are solar, wind, geothermal, hydroelectric and tidal energy. People often make the mistake of asking which out of these energy sources is the way forward, when in fact in reality, renewables work best as part of a diverse energy mix. Some renewables might be better suited for specific environments. So for example, areas with a lot of desert and sunlight might use more solar power, whereas areas with more wind and more active tides might opt for wind and tidal. There are also advantages and disadvantages to each renewable source. Hydroelectric dams can generate a lot of electricity, but their environmental impact should be assessed before construction. Solar and wind have the lowest ecological impact, but suffer from intermittency without proper storage in place. Geothermal energy is plentiful and doesn't suffer from intermittency. It can also double as a source of heating. The downside, however, is that it isn't practical in some areas of the world, where other renewables might be better suited. Let's take a closer look at two two renewables that I think have quite a lot of potential: solar and geothermal. Of all the energy the sun emits, about 1000 watts per meter squared reaches the Earth's surface. The total surface area of the Earth is around 510 trillion square meters. So if the density of the energy hitting the Earth from the sun is about 1 kilowatt per meter squared, and we multiplied that by the surface area of the Earth, we get double the amount of the total solar energy hitting the Earth. Since only about half of the Earth is exposed to the sun at any given time, we halve this in order to get the total energy that's hitting the Earth's surface, which is about 2.55 times 10 to the power of 17 watts, or about 255,000 terawatts. Now obviously we're not going to cover the entire Earth's surface in solar panels, but bear with me here. Global energy consumption is currently around 15 terawatts. Just 0.1% of 255,000 terawatts is 255 terawatts. Today, your typical solar cell works at about 15% efficiency. So in an ideal scenario, if you covered just 0.1% of the Earth's surface in solar panels, you'll be generating about 38.5 terawatts of usable power. This means that you would only need to cover less than 0.05% of the Earth's surface in solar panels to meet current energy demand, as that would generate almost 20 terawatts. Now, a common argument against solar is that people ask where all the resources are going to come from to make all of these solar panels. Well, it turns out that solar cells are in fact made up of roughly 90% silicon. Where do you find silicon? Literally everywhere, as it makes up nearly 28% of the Earth's crust by mass. It's the single most abundant metal one can find. All in all, this means that solar alone is far superior to the burning of coal, oil and gas, not just in terms of environmental impact, but also the sheer abundance of energy it could provide. Geothermal is another type of renewable energy that has a lot of potential. The average global geothermal heat flux is approximately 0.1 megawatts per kilometer squared, which equates to 51 terawatts of tappable geothermal energy. If we were to harness a quarter of this, we could power most of the world for millions of years. With wind it's a similar story. There is currently 72 terawatts of viable wind potential worldwide. Harnessing just over 20% of this could provide for global energy needs. There are also many other renewables that can be used in small-scale scenarios and in specific locales, such as hydroelectric power if somewhere has the resources for it. A lot of people are a bit dubious about nuclear energy because of its past reputation, such as the incidents that have happened over the years, the most recent of which being in Fukushima, Japan. In reality, however, most of the time nuclear power is a safe, clean and energy-dense form of power generation that has served well in many areas of the world for many years. France is an example of a country that gets most of its power actually from nuclear energy. Additionally, with newer reactor designs, a lot of the public safety concerns can be mitigated. Traditionally, the main fuels that have been used in reactors up until now have been the isotopes uranium-233, uranium-235 and plutonium-239. Generation 4 reactors are the newest type of reactor, and they have the potential to operate at up to 45% efficiency. Current reactors aren't that far behind, at around 35% efficiency. And while nuclear power isn't renewable per se, it's a clean and energy dense form of power that would make for a great baseload. Some recent developments in this area, such as thorium power, could make nuclear even more viable. Thorium-232 is more abundant than uranium and plutonium, and is fertile instead of fissile, which means it only reacts when stimulated with a fissile activator, such as uranium-233. This allows for more efficient use of uranium, and adds even more to the safety of nuclear technology. Lastly, fusion is an emerging technology that gets closer to positive efficiency day by day, and when it does, will be the ultimate power source, especially in outer space. However, in this video I mostly want to focus on what we can do now with our current technology. While many of the energy sources I mentioned would be viable enough on their own, an energy mix that makes greater use of their potential could effectively create a surplus of energy magnitudes higher than our current energy demand. But where do we store all of this surplus energy? Common lithium-ion batteries require scarce resources to create, mainly lithium, which has an ecologically impactful mining process. Thankfully, there are more sustainable alternatives. Sodium-ion batteries are catching the attention of scientists and tech enthusiasts. They have a high capacity and are made from sodium, which is virtually limitless due to its presence in seawater. If we built batteries big enough, we could have them store most of our surplus energy, which could be used later on. The advantage of being able to use surplus energy from batteries is that it eliminates the problem renewables have with intermittency, and reduces demand for new energy production when batteries are full. This is more efficient than today's methods because energy can be stored and so it isn't wasted on the grid. A possible downside is that these grid batteries would need to be replaced after long periods of time, but new technologies have the potential to increase the lifetime of battery cells. We've talked a lot in this episode about where we're going to get our resources from and how we're going to source them sustainably and abundantly. What we're going to take a look at now is what forms of production we might use in a resource-based economy. 3D printing is something that I think deserves the credit it has been given. As a technology, it's pretty slick. It brings production into the home, which has some significant knock-on implications. What we might see going forward is a decline in large-scale, centralized manufacturing, with more of a focus on decentralized and on-demand production of goods. Just half a century ago, no one thought that most homes would have a personal computer, but now that is the case. Similarly, while most people today don't have access to the means of production, 3D printing allows everyone to have their own miniature factory. It could quite literally provide production power to the masses. Typically, the biggest cost in the production and provision of goods and services is labour. We are in the midst of the third industrial revolution, where more and more work is being automated. It is predicted that by as soon as 2022, 1 billion jobs worldwide will be replaced with automation. In fact, most of the practical and meaningful work that is done today could be automated. Manufacturing, transport and logistics, and public-facing services will likely be the first areas of the economy to undergo full automation. Since in an RBE there is no money or trade, there would simply be less work to do. There would be no more bullshit jobs like business advisors, accountants, recruitment, stockbrokers, and all the other paper-pushing jobs. We wouldn't need them anymore. All that would remain in a resource-based economy is work that is either tangible and productive or enjoyable. Most large-scale production can be automated even today. Many factories already use a considerable amount of automation, so it's just a matter of finishing the job. We might even be able to fully automate the 3D printing process. Furthermore, using resource management methods and the scientific method, we could work out the best industrial materials to use for any given application. We could also automate things like the maintenance of power plants as well as food production. But who will improve and maintain the robots? My answer to this question is quite simply anyone who's interested. There'd already be an incentive for enterprise and individuals to maintain automation solutions, as doing so means ensuring those individuals and groups have abundant access to the products they want or need. There will also likely be those who just have a genuine interest in technology and would willingly spend some of their now abundant free time focusing on the development of automation. There's also another incentive they'd have, which I'll get to in a later episode. Right, so we know how we're going to feed people and power things, produce goods and services, and we're probably going to distribute these things via automated drones, robots, and maglev/monorail freight. But what happens when people dispose of things? What about waste? Here is where things get interesting, and where I introduce the concept of the circular economy. The conventional production cycle involves the extraction of resources, producing things with those resources, distributing those things, and then comes waste. Today, we have a linear production cycle. Most spent and wasted stuff ends up in landfill, scrapyards, or even worse, the oceans. Not only does this have a huge ecological impact, we also waste a heck of a lot of useful resources doing things this way. And while countries such as Germany have some of the best performing recycling regimens in the world, it still doesn't go far enough for linear economic activities to be sustainable. Circular economics isn't just recycling on steroids. It's also about designing products to be broken down and disassembled into reusable materials and components at the end of their life. We already have the technology to recycle many plastics and metals, and glass and paper are already widely recycled worldwide. Today, some forms of recycling are not profitable. This is a problem for capitalism, but not for resource-based economies, because our focus would be maximizing the efficiency of resources, not maximizing profit. So, without monetary incentive, we would likely recycle most things one could think of, and also many things that you may not have thought about. As unappealing as it sounds, our sewage contains many useful and valuable materials such as phosphates, sulfates, and even rare metals like gold. We could recycle food waste into biofuel, compost, or nutrients for our industrial agriculture. Moreover, we could recycle wastewater and make it drinkable. Some scientists have even begun messing around with a cutting-edge method of recycling called molecular sorting, where we could break down pretty much anything into its raw components, although such science is still in its infancy. But just how far could we go with this? If we were able to have a circular economy where almost all resources were recovered after use, we would have the means of creating a renewable resource pool, of which we could perpetually expand, creating more and more abundance over time. This isn't some pie-in-the-sky idea. The majority of things we use to make products today, glass, most metals, lumber, and paper, can either be recycled many times or even infinitely. Bioplastics are a strong contender to oil-based plastics, and can either be recycled, or since some of them are biodegradable, can be used as compost to make even more bioplastics. Landfills are pretty much everywhere. In Europe alone, there are around 500,000 individual landfill sites as a result of linear product cycles. Landfill mining is a concept within circular economics where landfills are mined for precious and reusable materials. If we did this on a global scale, we could recover an awful lot of reusable plastics and metals, precious metals such as gold and silver, and many other things. We could recycle most of this and add it to our resource pool, growing it even more. Circular economics, when combined with automation, advanced agriculture, and clean and renewable energy generation, can create a plentiful abundance of available resources that is highly sustainable and has little environmental impact. 3D printing and similar technologies will give people and groups autonomy over production, and resource management systems in conjunction with this will only optimize a resource-based economy even further. I didn't originally plan to make this video as long as it was, as I underestimated the amount of detail I would go into at certain points of the episode. Regardless though, I hope you enjoyed it. This video was originally intended to be a primer for my next installment, but now I think it stands just as good on its own. In my next episode, we will be covering localization, how it can be done, and what implications it might have for RBEs and for our planet. With that said, thank you very much for watching. This is me signing off, and I'll catch you all next time.